Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the sandals of an exhausted demigod who's finally off clock, but still can't seem to say no to odd jobs. Imagine this. The sun's just dipping behind the bronze hills of Tiryns, and there you are, standing in a dung-splattered courtyard with the unmistakable scent of royal livestock curling into your nostrils. There's sweat clinging to your forehead, a broom in one hand, and a very large, very smug-looking ox staring you down. You're not a warrior right now. You're a stable hand. Welcome to the in-between life of Hercules. Now, just for context, he's already finished some of those famous labors. You know the ones. Slaying hydras, capturing golden deer, wrestling lions who probably deserved it. And now, he's got a gig organizing stable manure for King Aegean. Not the original stable cleaning task. The one he did before. No, this is a new one. Voluntary. For pocket drachmas. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to roosters crowing. Not majestic, zoo-sent roosters. Just slightly angry ones with feather tufts shaped like ancient brooms. The king of Elis has hired you. Well, Hercules technically, but you're his shadow in this story. To manage the royal stables. Not clean them. Manage them. Think sanitation logistics coordinator with a touch of rural glamour. Every morning, Hercules strides into barnyard like he's entering battle. The goats part ways for him. The donkeys roll their eyes. There's a pig named Colossus who actually salutes. You, meanwhile, are handed the shovel of destiny, a wooden relic allegedly carved by Daedalus himself. Probably not true. But hey, it's got nice balance and doesn't splinter. The goal? Restructure the stable layout to maximize airflow, minimize hoof congestion, and, ideally, reduce surprise manure incidents near the royal sandals. Hercules is surprisingly methodical. He draws grid diagrams in the dirt. He argues about goat hierarchy with shepherds. He invents a color-coded poop schedule. You learn that the third stall from the left has a ghost. A very passive-aggressive mule ghost who resents being outlived by hay. Hercules says just ignore her, which you do, until she knocks over a pitchfork every third night. Poltergeist or passive breeze. Historians still argue. Lunch breaks are fragrant. The royal kitchen sends you barley bread and hard cheese wrapped in fig leaves. Hercules swears the figs are sacred. You mostly use them to keep the goats from chewing your kneecaps. One afternoon, you and Hercules attempt to install a prototype hay-hoisting pulley system. It immediately drops half a bale on his foot. He doesn't flinch, but mutters something about needing stronger oxen, and wanders off to brainstorm an upgrade with nearby engineers who are definitely just two kids with a broken cartwheel. Now, here's your historical fact. The real King Aegean was rumored to own stables housing over 3,000 cattle, which meant, if you can believe it, more daily waste than some modern towns. Ancient Greek engineers, particularly in Elis, really did innovate clever irrigation ditches to help manage that, let's call it, earthy abundance. Back to your story. By week 3, the stable smells less horrifying. You rerouted a stream for basic cleansing. The goats are happier. Even the ghost mule seems chill. And Hercules? He's begun naming the chickens after his enemies. The rooster that bites everyone, Eurystheus. The hen that won't stop clucking at dawn, Hera. You try to remind him that eggs are neutral, but he insists it's motivational. Your nights are oddly peaceful. You sleep in a hayloft, lulled by the rhythmic snorts of sleeping livestock and the occasional midnight argument between rival sheep factions. Hercules snores like a boulder rolling down a mountain, but in a comforting way. One night, you catch him scribbling something onto a wax tablet. Rotational manure schedule, he whispers, serious as a priest. I'm calling it the Herculean method. You pretend not to see him draw a tiny heroic version of himself riding a wheelbarrow into battle. You begin to wonder if this is really about money or glory at all, or if maybe, just maybe, he actually enjoys this. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some lesser-known Greek fragments, Hercules is depicted not just as a brute force hero, but as someone who valued cleanliness and structure, especially after his labors. Whether that's myth or medieval reinterpretation is anyone's guess, but it does explain his weird enthusiasm for barn feng shui. One day, emissaries from another kingdom arrive. They inspect the stables. One actually compliments the smell, or rather, lack thereof. The king is impressed. You overhear someone whisper that they want to franchise Heraclean manure mastery across the Peloponnese. Hercules doesn't say much. But later that evening, as you both sit under a fig tree munching on stale honey biscuits, he turns to you and says, "This might be my legacy." You're pretty sure he's kidding. Pretty sure. Time passes. A new donkey arrives. It's feisty and refuses to enter its stall. Hercules gives it a speech about personal responsibility. The donkey responds by kicking over the olive oil cart. You both watch the golden liquid seep into the dirt like a libation to the gods. He sighs. It's always the olive oil. One last detail. There's a mural on the stable wall, half faded and painted during the reign of some forgettable king. One night, you catch Hercules touching it up, humming softly to himself. He adds a tiny image of himself in the corner, not as a hero, but as a stable boy in sandals and tunic, brushing a horse's mane with care. He catches you watching. "I look good in beige," he says. You agree. Eventually, it's time to move on. Another city, another chore. But you leave those stables with cleaner air, happier animals, and one extremely passive-aggressive ghost who now only knocks over pitchforks once a week. As you ride out, you spot a goat, Ares, apparently climbing the hayloft ladder again. You don't even question it. It's just another normal day in the not-so-epic downtime of Hercules. You're on a ship now, a creaky, sun-bleached little cargo boat named the Soggy Dolphin, bobbing across the wine-dark sea toward Crete. The air smells like seaweed, grilled fish, and regret. The deck sways under your feet, and somewhere beneath you, Hercules is arguing with a sailor about why goats should count as emotional support animals. The job this time? Cretan Cow-Wrangler. Specifically, you and Hercules have been hired by Queen Pasiphae's agricultural advisors to calm down her sacred cows. Apparently, they've been acting out, mooing all night, charging at altar boys, and, according to one witness, forming a triangle around a fig tree and refusing to move. You dock at Knossos under sky, so blue it looks fake. The palace is a maze of whitewashed walls and painted columns, all buzzing with priests, potters, and very busy bees. A bored-looking teenager meets you at the port with a bronze clipboard and a tunic that screams seasonal intern. "Welcome," he says, not meaning it. "The cows are over there." He points toward a field that looks oddly empty. You arrive to find the cows in what can only be described as a standoff with a group of gardeners. One is sitting like a sphinx on the royal compost bin. Another is repeatedly headbutting a wooden statue of Poseidon. Queen Pasiphae herself does not make an appearance, but you're told she wishes the beast well and is spiritually monitoring the situation. Her note also includes a drawing of a cow in a toga. You tape it to the side of your hut for morale. Hercules gets to work immediately. He walks among the cows like a man negotiating peace between minor deities. You, naturally, trail behind with a basket of apples and a growing sense that this job may have some bovine-based hazards. You learn quickly that each cow has a name, a title, and a very strong opinion on which grass is acceptable. There's Lady Mumira of the Eastern Glade, Sir Trotter's Immaculate, and one they just call Kevin, who snorts every time Hercules talks. The herd matriarch, a thick-necked bovine named Queen Butterhorn, is deeply unimpressed by your presence. She tolerates Hercules only because he once lifted her drinking trough with one hand and gently rotated it to a shadier patch. Since then, she's regarded him as a tolerable lesser being. Here's your historical fact. Cows were indeed revered in many ancient Mediterranean cultures, not just in Egypt. In Minoan Crete, bulls and cows were sacred animals, often associated with the divine feminine and fertility rites. The palace at Knossos contains numerous frescoes and artifacts celebrating their importance. Though, to be clear, there's no record of Kevin. Your main task? Supervised grazing. Every morning. You lead the herd to the palace garden perimeter, where they're allowed exactly 40 minutes of nibbling on royal-approved grass. Then it's back to the pens before someone eats a ceremonial daisy or tramples a priest's sandals again. Hercules starts giving them pep talks. You are sacred beings. Moo with intention. They ignore him. One afternoon, he attempts to introduce a stretching routine for joint health. It goes poorly. Kevin escapes. The chase through the labyrinth gardens takes 3 hours and ends with Kevin somehow perched on a statue of Daedalus, looking mildly triumphant. You suggest installing fences. Hercules insists on cow-to-cow dialogue. It's about trust, he says, as Lady Mumira tips over a wheelbarrow. Meanwhile, the Cretan advisors are extremely pleased. Cow milk production is up. Mooing is down. One of the younger cows, Tiny Honk, has started following you around like a loyal puppy. She occasionally rests her chin on your shoulder and sighs dramatically. Quirky tidbit time. A few scholars believe ancient Minoans practiced rudimentary animal therapy, gently brushing sacred animals, singing to them, even composing little poems to calm them during lunar festivals. It's debated, of course. Historians still argue whether such rituals were meant for actual bovine well-being or symbolic appeasement of agricultural gods. You try reciting one of those poems to Queen Butterhorn. She stares at you for 5 full seconds before licking your elbow and walking away. You consider that a win. Now there's an incident. A minor dignitary from Rhodes insists on touring the pastures. He wears too much gold, smells like pickled olives, and keeps asking if the cows perform. Before you can intervene, he tries to pet Queen Butterhorn without bowing first. You blink. Next thing you know, he's in the dirt, his tunic askew, one sandal missing, and Butterhorn calmly chewing on the end of his scroll. Hercules doesn't intervene. He claps once and says, "She is the sacred one after all." You don't see the Rhodian again. Evenings are slow and golden. The cows settle in. You sit by a small fire, listening to Hercules hum lullabies from some long-lost northern tribe. Sometimes he tells stories of his labors, but only the part involving food, naps, or falling off cliffs. He doesn't bring up the big ones much. There's a moment one particularly soft dusk, when you realize you've started to recognize the cows by their silhouettes. You know which one limps, which one snores, which one drools in her sleep. And it's comforting. A week later, you and Hercules build a shade pergola for the older cows. The priestesses are so delighted they send you fresh figs and a ceremonial comb carved from driftwood. You use it to brush Tiny Honk until she starts purring, or something very close to it. You do get one ceremonial day off. You wander the Knossos market, eat too many honey-drenched pastries, and watch Hercules arm wrestle a merchant for a better price on sandals. He wins naturally and gifts you a pair. They're embroidered with little cows. You wear them with pride. And then, just like that, the job ends. The cows are calmer. The advisors are smug. Queen Butterhorn grants you a single majestic snort of approval. Kevin tolerates a head pat. You and Hercules pack your gear, including a suspicious number of apples you're definitely not allowed to take, and board the next ship out. As you sail away, Tiny Honk lets out a single high-pitched moo. Hercules doesn't turn, but you swear you see his shoulders dip just a bit. Farewell, cows of Crete. You were weirdly therapeutic. The journey continues with the kind of job that, on paper, sounds dignified, intellectual, even, but you quickly learn that guarding an empty temple archive is a bit like babysitting a ghost who doesn't believe in reading. You and Hercules arrive at a quiet outpost nestled into the rocky cliffs near Delphi. The temple, pale and sun-warmed, overlooks a valley where olive trees sway like they've got secrets. There's a lot of humming wind, a few birds, and a single scroll nailed to the door that says, in faded red ink, "Guard the archives. Do not let anyone disturb the knowledge." You step inside. There's a room, a small room. It smells like dust and ancient goat. The shelves are bare except for 3 cracked scrolls, 1 moldy jar of honey, and a wooden stool that looks like it retired centuries ago. Hercules surveys the space with the expression of a man trying very hard not to look bored. Well, he says, maybe there's knowledge beneath the floor. You knock. It's just rock. The first few days, you try to take the job seriously. You sit on the stool. You hum quietly. You check the scrolls. One's a shopping list. One's in linear B. The last is just a doodle of a fish wearing a crown. Hercules insists on taking shifts. He spends his time pacing the perimeter, practicing intimidating glares, and building a tower out of pebbles. By day 4, the tower has a moat, a drawbridge, and a tiny pebble sculpture himself holding a broom. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Many temples across ancient Greece did maintain archives of sacred scrolls, tax records, and ceremonial writings. Some were guarded, some were public, and many, like this one, were more symbolic than functional. A lot of them were decoys, prestige installations meant to impress visiting dignitaries. And this place is almost certainly a decoy. Still, you try to do the job. You dust the empty shelves. You invent new organization systems for the 3 scrolls. One afternoon, you decide to write your own, the official guide to not guarding much. You're on chapter 3 when the first visitor arrives. It's a traveler from Thebes, wearing too many rings and sandals made of dyed goose feathers. He peers inside and sniffs. "This is the archive?" he says, clearly unimpressed. Hercules appears at your side, towering silent and flexing just slightly. The man decides he's actually more of a beach person and leaves. That becomes the rhythm of your days. Occasional wanderers show up, expecting wisdom. You offer them the scroll with the fish. One girl takes it and nods solemnly. "This speaks to me," she whispers. You make a note. Don't question epiphanies. Quirky tidbit time. In one odd fragment of Orphium, there's mention of the temple that remembers nothing. Scholars aren't sure if it was metaphorical or a sarcastic joke by a scribe who got tired of organizing blank tablets. You and Hercules begin to decorate. He paints frescoes on the wall using crushed berries. You arrange a honey jar on a pedestal and declare it the sacred offering to future snackers. You both get a little weird with the solitude. One night, Hercules stages a mock heist. You play the intruder. He catches you within 6 seconds and demands a 5-minute monologue about the consequences of disrespecting non-existent knowledge. You break character laughing, and he declares you unfit for espionage. Time passes. You start having long conversations about philosophy, like whether goats understand shame or why figs are so smug. You invent new Greek words. Scrollnesia, the sensation of forgetting what you were supposed to guard. One day, a mouse appears. You name him Petros. He becomes the archive's unofficial librarian. You build him a tiny desk and give him the doodle scroll. He shreds it to nest with. Eventually, Hercules decides to hold a ceremony. He declares it the festival of forgotten knowledge. You light one oil lamp. Hercules delivers a speech to the olive trees. You both hum for 10 minutes and then eat the sacred honey. It tastes like dust and time. You call it progress. There's one event that shakes things up. A strong wind whips through the valley one night and knocks over a small statue outside the door. When you investigate, you find hidden beneath its base a real scroll, sealed in wax, written in a forgotten dialect. You bring it inside like it's a treasure chest. You light every lamp. Hercules holds his breath. You both open it slowly. It's a very old, very detailed recipe for lentil stew, written by someone named Doros, son of Doros. You both nod. This is now the heart of the archive. Historians still argue whether ancient lentil recipes were ever considered sacred. Some say yes. Others claim monks just got very, very hungry. A few more weeks go by. You and Hercules create a rotating guard schedule. You carve petroglyphs into the doorway, stick figures with brooms and scrolls, and increasingly elaborate cow heads. The mouse disappears for 2 days. You hold a candlelight vigil. He returns, unimpressed. Then one morning, a scroll arrives, delivered by a silent courier in green sandals. It's from the temple elders. Your watch is complete. It says, "The archive is secure. Thank you." You look around. Nothing has changed, except maybe everything. You and Hercules pack up. You leave the recipe scroll, the painted walls, and the still suspicious honey jar. You leave Petros a tiny mural of himself in heroic pose. Then you walk away from the temple that remembered nothing, but gave you everything you didn't know you needed. As you descend the hill, Hercules hums a lullaby. You hum along. The wind carries it off, echoing across the olive trees like a secret. You arrive at your next gig with sticky fingers and a skeptical nose. The assignment? Olive oil taste tester for a minor royal household on the coast of Attica. The pay? Generous. The risk? Mild indigestion. The prestige? Let's just say you're now considered a palatal consultant. Fancy words for guy who eats bread soaked in oily stuff while nodding thoughtfully. You and Hercules arrive at the villa under a sky as flat and golden as a well-pressed pancake. The estate is surrounded by olive groves so meticulously pruned, you'd think the trees were preparing for a sculpture contest. The steward greets you with what can only be described as the energy of a man who once tried to flirt with a marble statue. "Welcome," he says. "Our master has extremely discerning taste." Hercules smiles politely and then crushes a walnut in his bare hand. The steward rethinks his tone. Inside the tasting room, a columned courtyard open to the breeze. You find long tables covered with amphorae of olive oil in every shade of green imaginable. There are oils from Sparta, Lesbos, even one rumored to have been squeezed by nymphs under a full moon. That one glows suspiciously in low light. Your job? Sample them. Rank them. Describe the flavor with appropriately vague Greek adjectives like robust, heroic, or lascivious. Hercules, surprisingly, takes it very seriously. He dips the bread, chews slowly, and murmurs things like notes of pomegranate seed and undertones of accidental laurel. You, on the other hand, mostly try not to fall asleep mid-chew. Fun historical fact. Olive oil was a staple of ancient Greek life. Beyond cooking, it was used in lamps, skincare, religious rituals, and athletic competitions. Wrestlers often slathered themselves in it before matches. The better the oil, the more impressive the wrestler, which might explain why Hercules insists on hydrating his elbows between samples. By day 3, your tongue is confused. Every oil starts to taste like aggressively fruity sadness. Hercules starts ranking the oils using heroic metaphors. This one battles bravely on the tongue, but loses the war in the throat. Another gets described as a cowardly cousin of last Tuesday's olive. You invent a point system using pebbles. Hercules adds dramatic flair by shouting the oil score to the gods. The steward is less amused when a few amphorae get accidentally knocked over in the excitement. Then there's the incident. One morning, a mysterious new amphora appears. No label, no origin, just a wax seal in the shape of a lyre. The steward claims it's from a distant cousin of Apollo's personal olive grove. You're pretty sure he made that up. Still, you taste it. It's incredible. Smooth, balanced, a little grassy, a little arrogant. Hercules immediately declares it the Achilles of oils. You agree reluctantly and request a second taste. Too late. It's already missing. Gone. Amphora, tablecloth, and all. The steward panics. He accuses the gardener. The gardener accuses a goat. The goat accuses no one, but looks very satisfied. Quirky tidbit time. There really were elite olive oil competitions in ancient Greece. Judges were trained from a young age to identify region, quality, and even seasonality by taste alone. Some oils were so prized, they were sealed in decorated flasks and traded like currency. You and Hercules decide to run your own taste-off. Invite only. You set up a panel of goats, children, and one very grumpy priest who thinks olive oil should only be used for anointing. Hercules makes everyone wear laurel wreaths. You crown a winner, a blend from Corinth that tastes faintly of time and smugness. Later that week, you're offered a bonus to help name the oils for branding. You spend an entire morning debating between Posei Drizzle and Evil of the Titans. Eventually, Hercules vetoes all your ideas and submits his own, Liquid Heroism. It sells out immediately. Your days begin to blend together, like a well-aged vinaigrette. You dream in shades of green. You begin describing everything in olive terms. That cloud looks oily. You mutter at breakfast. These sandals feel extra virgin, says Hercules, deadpan. At night, You rest your head on a sack of bread rolls and drift off to the gentle sound of amphory clinking in the breeze. One evening, a servant brings you a small, private amphora marked with your name in wonky handwriting. Inside is a perfect oil, crisp, warm, with just a hint of nostalgia. You never find out who made it. One last moment. Hercules stands in the grove one afternoon, arms outstretched, as sunlight filters through the trees. He looks serene. You ask him what he's thinking. He replies, "I finally understand the olives. They wish to be squeezed." You blink. You nod. You move on. Eventually, the steward informs you your services are no longer required, mostly because the entire royal family is now arguing about which oil pairs best with honey cakes. You pack your notes, your olive-stained tunic, and one suspiciously heavy amphora that you definitely didn't steal. You wave goodbye to the groves, the goats, and the priest who still isn't convinced this counts as a real job. You and Hercules walk off into the dusk, the sky glowing with the color of, well, you guessed it, fresh-pressed olive oil. You're not sure how you got here. Exactly. One minute you were reclining under an olive tree, mouth still oily from the last tasting gig. The next, you're balancing a long, very breakable ceramic vase on your shoulder while dodging a cat and listening to Hercules argue with an aristocrat about stair width. Your new job, Pottery Delivery Boy. You know, for a hero, Hercules sure takes a lot of humble gigs. This time, the client is an eccentric aristocrat in Athens who insists that every guest at a symposium receive their wine in a unique, handcrafted vase. No repeats, no chips, no excuses. You and Hercules are hired to deliver the order. 76 fragile amphorae, up a hill, in sandals. Your promise generous compensation in figs, drachmas, and possible compliments. You haven't seen the figs yet. You begin the first morning at the potter's workshop, where the air is thick with kiln smoke and the smell of wet clay. The potter is named Melon. Yes, like the fruit. He wears a stained chiton and hums sea shanties about goat taxes. Nice guy, slightly terrifying when holding a glazing stick. He shows you the inventory, rows upon rows of red figure vases, each depicting some myth or heroic scene. Achilles sulking, Odysseus napping, a goat dancing with Dionysus. Your job is simple: pack, carry, deliver, and do not shatter any of them. Easier said than done when Hercules insists on carrying 5 at a time to build forearm endurance. The streets of Athens are not made for gentle travel. Cobblestones jut like angry molars. Chickens roam freely. At least twice, you're chased by a child with a stick pretending to be Zeus. On one memorable trip, a donkey sneezes directly into your face. You blink, holding the vase above your head like a golden trophy, and keep walking. Mainstream historical fact here: ancient Greek pottery wasn't just functional, it was storytelling. Scenes painted on amphorae, kylixes, and craters often preserve myths, historical events, and even inside jokes of the time. Potters were both craftsmen and chroniclers, and their work has survived long after most buildings crumbled. Back to your day. You quickly learn which homes have tricky steps, which neighbors own unpredictable dogs, and which corners harbor impromptu liar players. Hercules takes it all in stride, one stopping mid-delivery to help a woman lift a goat into a cart. The goat kicks him the shin. He thanks it. You fall into a rhythm. Pick up vase. Wrap it in wool. Balance it like a sacred relic. Walk carefully. Breathe. Deliver. Bow politely. Collect figure. Repeat. You begin rating the households on the other end. There's a lady who gives you olives and says your vase-bearing posture is divine. There's a man who frowns at the smallest chip and offers nothing but a sigh. And there's a very old philosopher who asks you if the vase symbolizes the impermanence of beauty before tripping over it. The vase shatters. Everyone stares. Hercules sighs, then gives the man a piggyback ride to the symposium and recites a haiku about resilience. The philosopher cries and names a turtle after him. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some pottery in ancient Greece was made with built-in riddles or hidden inscriptions, messages that only revealed themselves when wine was poured or when a light hit just right. One famous kylix even hides a joke about a crab who became a tax collector. Scholars still argue if it was social commentary or just potter humor. You and Hercules do encounter one of these. A small vase with an image of Hercules himself, not lifting a lion or slaying a beast, but reclining, delivering pottery. He stares at it, amused. Prophetic, he mutters, and carries it with particular reverence. The final day is the worst. A freak rainstorm turns the streets to slippery mush. You wrap the vases tighter. Hercules makes up a battle chant to motivate you. And oh cracks, and oh shards, just heroic regard. You chant it under your breath like a mantra. One vase breaks. Just one. Melon takes it calmly. That one, he says, was cursed anyway. You do not ask follow-up questions. You're paid in silver, figs, and a small ceramic cup with your initials etched in shaky hand. Hercules gets a goblet shaped like a lion's head. You get a firm handshake from a customer who calls you the Hermes of ceramics. Not bad. One last delivery stands out. A boy no older than 8 receives a simple, unpainted amphora. He looks at it, wide-eyed. "This will hold my secrets," he whispers. You nod solemnly. "Keep them dry," you say, and then it's over. You and Hercules sit on the edge of the agora, legs sore, hands clay-stained, watching the sunset turn the Acropolis golden. You eat figs. You don't even like figs anymore, but you eat them anyway. It's symbolic. Hercules raises his goblet to fragile things that survive the journey. You clink your little cup against his, and for a moment, you feel like maybe pottery delivery was an epic labor, just a quieter one. By now, your calves are stone, your tunic smells like wet wool, and you swear your spine has permanently molded into the shape of an amphora. So of course, that's exactly when Hercules signs you both up for a light gig in Delphi. You raise an eyebrow. Delphi, the center of the world? Home to the oracle? Epicenter of cryptic advice and mysterious fumes? Sure, sounds super chill. Your new job? Scribe's assistant. Yes, assistant. You're not even the scribe. You're the assistant to the scribe. The actual scribe, a woman named Diana, writes down the ramblings of pilgrims who visit the oracle. She has ink stains on her fingertips, a braid longer than your patience, and the tired stare of someone who's transcribed too many riddles about lost goats. Hercules is helping carry scrolls. You're tasked with sorting wax tablets, preparing ink, and occasionally catching fainting pilgrims. The oracle, after all, doesn't pull punches. One poor guy collapses after hearing, "The stars are not your friends." You fan him with a hymnal. Your station is near the Pythia's chamber, where sacred vapors swirl and the future gets mumbled out between sips of spring water. You can't go in, obviously. You're not elite or possessed enough, but you sit just close enough to overhear snippets. The eagle knows not the way to worms. 3 chickens will signal the end. Beware the man with 2 tunics. Diana nods gravely at each one, writes them down, and you blot the ink. It's hypnotic, weirdly calming, like working backstage at a very mysterious play. Mainstream historical fact here. The Oracle of Delphi, known as Pythia, was believed to channel Apollo's voice through trances induced by natural gases rising from a fault line beneath the temple. Many rulers and generals actually based huge decisions on her advice, even when that advice was, shall we say, open to interpretation. Hercules, of course, draws attention. A crowd of pilgrims gathers just to watch him carry a scroll. Someone offers him a lamb in exchange for a hug. He gently declines. Another requests he asks the oracle whether it's okay to marry their cousin. He declines more firmly. You, meanwhile, start noticing patterns. Some of the messages make sense. General warnings, poetic metaphors, subtle jabs at bad decision-making. But some don't, like at all. One man is told, "Your destiny smells like oranges." He bursts into tears. Thanks the oracle. Leaves a bowl of figs. Diana mutters, "He probably hates oranges." And then there's the incident with the sacred goose. Yes, a goose. You're organizing wax tablets when a frantic priest rushes in yelling, "The goose is loose." The sacred goose, symbol of some obscure harvest deity, has escaped and is now wreaking havoc among the incense burners. You glance at Hercules. He shrugs. "I'll get it." What follows is the quietest, most respectful goose chase in history. Hercules stalks it with a solemn gait, arms out like a slow-motion bear. You assist by laying down a breadcrumb trail. The goose, not to be outwitted, evades you both for 45 minutes before finally walking into a laundry basket voluntarily. You're not sure if that counts as a win. Hercules bows to it. The goose honks once, like an ancient benediction. Quirky tidbit time. While the Oracle was a headline act, Delphi had a whole side hustle culture. Vendor sold protective charms, fake prophecies, and miracle beans, spoiler. Not miraculous. It was a thriving economy of mysticism, complete with sacred souvenirs and divine keychains. Historians still argue whether the Oracle's role was truly mystical or a very elaborate form of political theater, backed by geological gases and careful wordplay. Later that week, you're sent to retrieve a lost scroll from the temple archives. It's there, amid dust and owl droppings, that you stumble across a record labeled Labor 6.5, Quiet Year. It's short, a few lines, mentions Hercules taking on clerical duties to restore spiritual balance. You blink. It's definitely him. Stick figure lion tattoo and all. You show him. He laughs. They left out the goose. That evening, you're invited to witness a sunset prayer on the edge of the cliff. The sun dips below the olive-studded hills, casting a golden shimmer across the temple of Apollo. Hercules stands beside you, arms crossed, breathing deeply. For once, no one's asking him for feats or favors. He says nothing. Neither do you. The prayer rises, soft chants, low drums, a single reed pipe, and you feel something loosen inside your chest. Maybe it's the altitude. Maybe it's the goose. Maybe it's just the quiet. You sleep that night on woven mats behind the scriptorium, dreaming of riddles and ink and mist. In the dream, the oracle whispers, you will return to the sea, which is weird because you're pretty sure you left your sandals in a tree earlier. You wake up with olive pits in your hair and a goose feather tucked behind your ear. No explanation offered. No explanation needed. Delphi, with all its incense and murmurs and eerie mountain breezes, fades behind you. Hercules decides it's time to move on. We need something simpler, he says. Something quiet. You agree. Nothing says quiet like boat repair. At the harbor town of Naupactus, the two of you are hired to assist an elderly shipwright named Theron. He's 90 if he's a day, walks like driftwood in a storm, and smells like salt water and old wine. His beard has its own ecosystem. Theron doesn't ask questions. Doesn't care who Hercules is. You can lift planks? Good. You can sand? Better. You can cook lentils? Perfect. I'm tired of lentils. Then he hands you both chisels and points to a half-sunken fishing boat. Your job, restore it. It's a 2-week gig. Long days, early starts. Plenty of time for splinters and quiet thoughts. You sand warp beams under the hot sun, fill cracks with pine pitch, and spend an unreasonable number of hours untangling ropes that seem to tangle themselves. Hercules turns out to be excellent at hammering in rivets with a single tap, less excellent at fine carving. His decorative dolphin looks more like a worried potato. You assure him it has character. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek boats weren't all majestic triremes with dozens of oars. Most vessels were humble fishing boats, traders, or short-range ferries. Built using mortise and tenon joints and sealed with pitch, these boats were the lifeblood of everyday Greek commerce, food, and travel. Theron talks nonstop about his late wife, his pet tortoise, which he's fairly sure is immortal, the time he met a talking squid. You nod, hammer, and wonder whether the squid was more metaphorical than literal. Historians still argue whether sailors' tales of sea monsters were embellished metaphors or genuine accounts of rare oceanic creatures, like giant squid washing ashore. There's a moment, around day 6, where everything slows. You're knee-deep in boat guts. Hercules is smoothing out the hull. Theron naps in the shade with his tortoise, whose name is Crab. The waves lapping against the dock are slow, lazy, hypnotic. You smell tar, cedar, lemons from a nearby crate. And for the first time in a while, you realize you're content. No monster chasing you. No riddle to decipher. Just sanding wood. Then, of course, the jellyfish incident happens. You're on the beach, dragging seaweed off a net, when you step directly, perfectly, on a transparent gelatinous blob. Time slows. Your foot lifts. Your scream rises. Hercules, hearing it, sprints over, hoists you like a soggy loaf of bread, and dunks your foot in a barrel of vinegar. He nods, like this is a normal Tuesday. Theron chuckles, not looking up. You've been baptized. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Greeks believed jellyfish stings could be cured by vinegar, oil, or even urine. The latter is thankfully not used here, but the vinegar works wonders. Hercules insists on carrying you for the rest of the afternoon. You pretend not to enjoy it. By day 12, the boat floats. Not just floats, glides. She's beautiful, repainted white and blue. The name Alcyone etched in new cedar on her side. Alcyone, a mythic woman turned kingfisher. Fitting, somehow. Theron tears up. You try not to. You and Hercules take her out for a test row. The oars creak. The water gleams like a sky made of coins, and you spot dolphins trailing behind. Not potato-shaped ones. Real ones. You wonder if they're here to critique the carving. Later, Hercules asks, "You think I could have been a sailor?" You smirk. Only if you stop rowing in circles. There's laughter. Not heroic, booming laughter. Just soft, salty chuckles between friends in a boat. Theron gives you both payment in the form of dried fish, a jug of wine, and a suspicious jar labeled simply, "Don't open near cats." You pack it carefully. You may never know what's inside. Best not to. You leave Naupactus on foot again, the smell of pine pitch still stuck to your tunic. Your arms ache, your shoulders sunburned, but your heart is light. Alcyone bobbing gently at her dock behind you, ready to sail again. And then on the horizon, looming cliffs, a ruined lighthouse, and the ruins of a place called Pyrgos. Hercules shades his eyes. Next job. You sigh. Can't we just sand another boat? But no. The next gig involves bees. The cliffs of Pyrgos loom like sleeping giants, all hunched shoulders and jagged brows. You can smell wild thyme on the wind, sharp and herbal. Somewhere nearby, something buzzes. You barely arrive when a woman in a saffron tunic flags you down. "You're the strong one, right?" she says to Hercules, then eyes you. "And you are the one who looks like they ask her questions?" You shrug. "That depends. Are the bees yours?" She nods solemnly. "Welcome to your next job, beekeeping assistant." Her name is Astara, and she owns a sloping apiary carved into the cliffs just outside Pyrgos. Over 400 hives, stacked in neat rows like miniature amphorae. Her bees are famously gentle, she claims, though one has a grudge against her left ear. Long story, she mutters. Don't ask. You and Hercules are here because her last assistant, some poor lad named Andronikos, fled in terror after the queen swarm migrated and tried to claim the pantry. You try not to read too much into that. The work is steady, strange, and sweet. You light the smoke pots, wave the clouds over the hives like some sleepy incense priest, and hum as you move between bee boxes. Hercules wears a veil 3 sizes too small and mutters threats at the buzzing clouds. The bees are not impressed. Mainstream historical fact. Beekeeping in ancient Greece was a highly refined practice. Beehives were often made from terracotta cylinders, stacked horizontally. Honey wasn't just food, it was medicine, a sacred offering, and even used in embalming rituals. Aristotle himself wrote extensively about bees, fascinated by their hierarchy and order. But let's be clear, ancient Greek bees did not care about Aristotle. They care about flowers' vibrations and whether or not you step too close to the queen. On day 3, Hercules gets stung directly on the nose. The swelling turns into a shape that could charitably be described as potato-esque. You stifle a laugh. He does not appreciate it. Still, he soldiers on. You help gather honey, its golden stickiness clinging to your fingers like sun-warmed syrup. You taste it, surprised by the notes of thyme, fennel, and sea air. Hestara says her bees forage as far as 10 miles, and sometimes return scented like other islands. You clean wax frames, extract honey with a stone-weighted press, and stack clay pots until your arms ache. There's something hypnotic about the rhythm of it all. Open hive. Smoke gently. Hum softly. Check queen. Avoid buzzing near ears. Repeat. You develop a respect for the bees. Their logic. Their math. Their dances. Those tiny vibrating patterns that tell others where to fly. You try mimicking one. Waggle walking in a lazy figure eight. Hestara watches with arms crossed. That was interpretive, she says, but I admire the effort. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Greeks believed bees were messengers of the gods, particularly linked to Artemis and Demeter. Some myths claim bees were once priestesses who transformed to escape human greed. Others suggest the dead could whisper through hive walls if you listen close enough. So one night, under the honeymoon glow, you try. You lie on the ground beside hive 12B, press your ear against the warm clay, and listen. Buzzing, vibrations, a low hum like 1,000 whispered secrets, but no ghostly words. Still, you feel oddly calm. Historians still argue whether the mystical connection between bees and oracles was purely symbolic or based on specific ritual behaviors, like whispering wishes to hives before harvest. On day 7, disaster strikes. A bear, not metaphorical, not mythological. A very large, very hungry bear crashes to the olive grove at dawn, drawn by the scent of honey and the soft buffet of bees. You wake to Hestara shouting, Hercules sprinting barefoot, and about 100 bees with nowhere safe to hide. The bear paws at the hives, topples 3, and growls with honey-slathered satisfaction. Then Hercules tackles it. Yes, really, you're not sure whether to help or stand there with your mouth open. But eventually, after a blur of grunts, growls, and sticky swipes, the bear backs off, bewildered, sticky, and possibly impressed. It leaves. Hercules looks down at himself. Am I covered in honey or blood? You squint. Bit of both, probably, but mostly wax. You spend the next day rebuilding the topple hives, soothing angry bees, and patching Hercules with a mixture of olive oil and lavender. Hestara gives him a ribbon. For bravery, she says, and for not squishing any of the queens. By the end of your stay, you've earned 10 jars of honey, a block of golden beeswax, and the begrudging affection of Hive 4C. You still get buzzed by Hive 7, but they're famously grumpy. As you walk away from Purgos, you feel a lightness in your step and a sting on your ankle. One final souvenir. Hercules laughs. Maybe you were the favorite after all. You nod. I hope they tell stories about us. And maybe they will. Farther down the dusty road, the land turns rocky again, scattered with goat paths and forgotten wells. You reach a small village with crooked signs and a tavern called the Knotted Turnip. Hercules squints at a flyer pinned to the wall. Help needed, olive press jammed. Local priest suspects curses. He turns to you. Think we got time for one more? You sigh, already reaching for your pack. Fine, but if the olives are haunted, I'm not touching them. By the time you reach the olive grove, your sandals are dust-caked and your arms still smell faintly of honey and bear fur. The path dips into a little valley, where crooked olive trees grow like they've been here since time itself began. Their trunks are twisted like old men's knuckles, and their silvery leaves whisper secrets in the breeze. At the heart of it all stands an ancient olive press, a stone ring with a long wooden beam, now jammed mid-crush. A cluster of locals surrounds it, arms folded, faces pinched with concern. One of them, a wiry man in ceremonial robes, steps forward. You must be the strong one, he says to Hercules, then to you, and the one who pretends not to be involved. You nod. That's your brand. The priest's name is Acanthus. He gestures toward the olive press, where several baskets of ripe, glossy olives sit waiting. The press is stuck. We tried grease, prayers, even shouting. Nothing. We suspect a curse. Of course they do. Hercules cracks his knuckles and circles the press like a lion around a stubborn meal. You crouch beside the stone, run your hand along the groove where the beam sits. It's wedged tight, jammed with a strange waxy residue that smells faintly of fennel and old shoes. Did anyone maybe try to lubricate this with goat fat? You ask. Acanthus winces. Possibly. Maybe. We're not craftsmen. We're spiritual. It might have also been leftover temple wax. You sigh. Cool. So we're trying to uncurse your goat fat temple wax olive press. Time to get to work. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient olive presses were marvels of simple engineering, using gravity and leverage. People would crush ripe olives in stone basins and then press the pulp to extract oil, a valuable commodity for cooking, lighting, and religious rituals. Greek olive oil was exported across the Mediterranean. Some presses could produce hundreds of liters per day during harvest season. But first, you gotta fix this one. Hercules wedges a bronze pry bar beneath the beam. You brace the far side with your foot. Acanthus lights incense and starts chanting softly. Mostly, please don't snap, tight prayers. You grunt. He groans. The beam creaks. With a loud crack, it pops free, and a splatter of fermented olive mush sprays across your tunic. Success. And lunch. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Greeks sometimes flavored olive oil with herbs, ashes, or even cheese. Yes, cheese. Not all of these combinations have stood the test of time, but one odd variant called Thruin oil was blended with pomegranate rind and sea salt, used by athletes to rub down before games. It probably didn't smell great, but it got the job done. Your reward? An invite to the olive harvest feast. You help sort olives by ripeness. Green ones for brining, black ones for oil, shriveled ones for the goats. The villagers show you how to use woven mats for pressing, how to store the oil in tall amphoras sealed with clay, and how to tell sacred oil from salad oil. Later that night, under a tent strung with fig branches and tiny flickering lanterns, you eat grilled flatbread dipped in fresh oil, feta, so sharp it bites back, and a handful of the sweetest grapes you've ever tasted. There's music too, flutes clapping, the steady thump of a foot drum. Someone hands Hercules a tambourine. He frowns at it like it insulted his mother. Just shake it on the beat, you whisper. He does. The tambourine does not survive the experience. Historians still argue whether these harvest feasts were primarily social, religious, or economic in nature. The reality is likely a mix of all three. Olive oil was sacred to Athena, and offerings were common during pressing. But people also needed excuses to eat, dance, and avoid thinking about winter. At one point during the night, an elderly woman leans close and asks if you're betrothed. You choke on a grape. To whom, you ask? She shrugs. I don't know. Someone strong. Someone who smells like honey. You make a note to move on soon. The next morning, Acanthus gives you a small amphora of the good stuff. First press oil infused with bay and wild garlic, and a carved olive wood spoon. For stirring the fates, he says with a wink. Hercules stretches, yawns, and points to a goat trail leading south. One more odd job, he asks. You roll your eyes. Sure. What is it this time? He holds up a note scribbled in charcoal. Wanted, help moving giant urn. Will pay in barley bread and compliments. I like both of those things, you say. So you walk through dusty hills in the scent of fig trees, down to a forgotten village where the houses are more ruin than roof. A single man waits for you beside the world's largest ceramic pot. It's so wide he stored a cot and a chicken inside. This, he says, is my storage urn. I'm moving. Where, you ask? 3 hills over. Why? Hercules asks. I heard it's sunnier. You and Hercules stare at each other, then at the urn, then back at the man. No, you say. He blinks. But I have compliments. Let's hear one. You look competent. You sigh. Fine. It takes all day, 6 logs, a pulley you jury-rig from goat harnesses, and 3 loud disagreements. The chicken inside never stops squawking. You get chased by a boar unrelated, and Hercules sprains his thumb, mildly dramatic. But you make it. The urn now rests on its new sunlit hill. The man thanks you with barley bread, which is extremely dry, and a second compliment. You have sturdy knees. You're not sure whether to be flattered or offended. As you walk away, Hercules mutters, we need to start charging actual coin. You nod, or at least olives that don't talk. You follow a winding river now, shallow and green. Frogs sing from the reeds. The air is thick with humidity and the scent of mint. Somewhere ahead, smoke curls upward. A sign dangles crookedly from a fig tree. Loom repairs. Must love wool. You squint. Hercules shrugs. Do you love wool? I'm willing to tolerate it. He cracks his knuckles. Then let's go fix a loom. The cottage is crooked in that charming, accidentally on-purpose kind of way. Vines creep along its stone walls, and the wooden shingles of the roof are sun-bleached and curling. A sheep snoozes on the front step like a lumpy doormat, and inside, you hear the distinct rhythmic clack of a loom, followed by an angry yelp. You knock. The door swings open with creak, revealing a short, wild-haired woman with shawl of rainbow-colored yarns tossed over one shoulder, and a spindle jammed behind her ear like a weapon. Her name is Parthenope, and she scowls at you like you've just suggested burning her yarn stash. You the strong one, she barks at Hercules. Then her eyes slide to you. And the other one? I'm here for loom-related emotional support. You say. She grunts. It's broken. Again. Every time I fix the tension, the shuttle decides it wants to be a bird. It flies right off the frame. She gestures toward the wooden loom dominating the center of the room. It's a gorgeous piece of craftsmanship. Smooth olive wood, clever pegs and notches, and a huge vertical frame that looks like it could double as a siege engine. Currently, the threads are snarled, the shuttle is jammed halfway through the warp, and a pile of tangled wool rests on a chair like a deflated goat. Mainstream historical fact. The vertical warp-weighted loom was standard in ancient Greece. Women wove wool or linen into garments, sails, and temple banners. It took months to complete a single peplos, and weaving was both a domestic task and a sacred ritual, especially in honor of Athena, goddess of wisdom, war, and crafts. Hercules picks up the shuttle. Looks simple. Parthenope narrows her eyes. Did you just insult my loom? He freezes. No. Good. You get to work. You untangle threads while Hercules repairs the frame, carefully replacing cracked dowels and sanding the pegs smooth. Parthenope mutters the whole time, mostly to her yarn. As you thread the heddles, she leans close. I tried to hire an oracle once. She told me the loom was cursed. I told her she was cursed. Then she left. Quirky tidbit. Some looms were thought to hold personality or even a kind of mild haunting. In rare cases, weavers whispered charms to their looms before beginning a project. One surviving fragment from Delphi warns, "Speak fair to the wood or it may warp your work." You try it. You pat the loom gently. You're doing great. It groans. Eventually, Hercules realigns the treadles, and you thread the final wool strand through the reed. Parthenope beams like a parent watching a child's first steps. "I shall weave a tapestry of the great boar chase," she declares. Or, "Maybe the time I got a pine cone stuck in my sandal." Artistic license, you guess. That evening, she insists you stay for stew, lentils, leeks, and something she calls mystery root. That might be turnip and might be regret. The fire crackles. A cat you didn't notice earlier curls up on your foot. Parthenope weaves as you eat, feet tapping the treadles with practiced rhythm. The cloth glows gold under the lamplight, row by row. "Ever think of weaving?" she asks you. "I barely mastered tunic wearing." You say. She nods approvingly. Then you be terrible. Good. The next morning, you leave with full belly, scratchy socks, and a bundle of leftover yarn you're pretty sure you'll never use. Hercules examines it like it might turn into a snake. As the sun climbs, you follow the trail up into the high hills. Pines sway overhead, and the air smells of resin and rock. You pass shepherds, goats with bells, and one incredibly suspicious-looking hawk that follows you for half a mile. Eventually, you arrive at a flat plateau where a circle of young men in short chitons are doing flips. "Ah," you say, "the acrobats." A wiry youth runs up. "We heard the strong man can help us with our pyramid." Hercules raises an eyebrow. "You want me to be the base?" "Please." "And me?" you ask. The youth thinks. "Moral support, or you can throw flower petals." You blink. "Flower petals?" He shrugs. "It's for the festival." Historians still argue whether these gymnastic displays were religious offerings, martial training, or just a chance to impress potential suitors. Either way, Balanced pyramids were a thing. 3 or 4 tiers of living architecture, usually ending with a flute player or someone balancing a jug on their head. You end up holding the flower basket. The team stacks up, 2 on the bottom, 2 above them. Hercules dead center like a mountain, and finally a flute player scrambling up to perch on his shoulder. You scatter petals dramatically. Then it all collapses. No one is seriously injured, except maybe Hercules' pride. They try again, and again. By the 6th attempt, you suggest moving on to sand instead of rock. The 7th attempt almost works. On the 8th, success momentarily. The flute player took the triumphant note, the crowd cheers, and Hercules mutters, "If I get stuck holding boys and chitons again, I'm quitting." You hand him a pedal. You were beautiful. He does not appreciate it. You leave the acrobats with a basket of dates and a small clay medallion that reads Festival Hero. Your next destination lies deeper inland, in the forest. The pines give way to thicker underbrush, and you start spotting carved boundary stones. Signs you're entering sacred ground. Soon enough, you find it, a worn temple devoted to Artemis. A priestess waits on the steps, arms folded. "We need help." You glance around. No monsters, no fire, just trees. "With what?" She sighs. "Our sacred deer escaped. Again." You blink. "Deer?" "Yes." "Large. Golden antlers. Aggressive." Hercules perks up. "Sounds fun." Mainstream historical fact. Artemis, goddess of the hunt and wild animals, was associated with a legendary golden-horned deer called a Ceryneian hind. According to myth, Hercules was tasked with capturing it alive as one of his labors. Some think the deer was inspired by actual species of antelope or elk, possibly even imported from the east. You follow the tracks into the woods. For hours, it's just hoof prints, crushed ferns, and occasional piles of what you choose to call forest clues. You find tufts of fur caught on branches, scratch marks on bark, and a woven garland hanging from a tree like a trophy. Then rustling. You hold your breath. The deer bursts from the undergrowth like a thunderclap. Tall as a horse, golden antlers glinting, hooves barely touching the ground. It's absurdly graceful, terrifyingly fast, and somehow wearing a small silver bell around its neck. "It's mocking us." You whisper. You sprint. Hercules sprints. You both trip. It loops around you twice, then vanishes into the trees. This repeats 6 times. Eventually, you stop chasing. You sit down. Think. You build a corral out of fallen branches. Set bait, a bowl of grain, some herbs, and a shiny pendant. Then you hide. The deer returns at dusk, sniffing the pendant like it's jewelry shopping. When it steps inside the corral, Hercules drops the gate. You hold your breath. It doesn't panic. Instead, it turns, locks eyes with you, and snorts in a very judgmental way, like you just used the wrong fork at a royal banquet. You escort it back to the temple. The priestess offers you honey cakes and a blessing. Hercules asks if the deer bites. You say yes, mostly emotionally. As you leave the forest, twilight paints the trees violet, and fireflies blink like sparks from a dream. The night stretches ahead, cool and vast. "What's next?" you ask. Hercules checks the scroll. Fix a sundial. Someone swears theirs is cursed. You groan. Why are all these jobs cursed? Because no one hires us when things are going well. You sigh, adjust your tunic, and head off toward the stars. The cursed sundial belongs to an elderly philosopher named Dorian, who lives atop a windy hill that seems to repel clouds the way most people repel taxes. His home is a modest stone affair, stacked with scrolls, potted thyme, and at least 6 unfinished statues of, probably himself. He greets you with the enthusiasm of someone who's just discovered 2 new minds to explain the universe to. You barely step over the threshold before he launches into a breathless monologue about shadows, solar alignments, and something about a turtle. The sundial. You manage to interject. "It's broken?" Dorian scowls as if you just accused a sacred text of plagiarism. "It tells the wrong hour," he declares. "Always, no matter the day. The sun mocks me. I cannot trust time, therefore I cannot trust truth." Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek sundials were marvels of early engineering. They use a central gnomon, a pointed stick, to cast a shadow onto a marked surface, indicating the hour based on solar position. However, they had to be precisely calibrated to local latitude and seasonal changes. Tricky business without modern trigonometry. You inspect the sundial. It's very pretty. Marble, etched with concentric hour lines, decorative dolphins swimming near the noon mark. But it's misaligned, off by a good 30 degrees. You suspect it was originally installed to face east and somehow got spun like a confused weather vane. Hercules shrugs. Let's just lift it. Gently, you warn, it's a scientific instrument, not a bench. He picks it up like a cookie tray. You reorient the base using a shadow test and a rough compass drawn in the dirt. It's not perfect, but the gnomon now points due north, and the shadow falls neatly on the correct hour. Dorian stares. So time was not broken, he says solemnly. Only my direction. Deep, you say. Quirky tidbit. Some Greek philosophers believed that if time could be mismeasured, it meant reality itself was subjective. One dramatic account claims a sophist once blamed a bad sundial for arriving late to his own execution. Dorian insists on repaying you with wisdom. He gives Hercules a pebble for luck, and you a scroll of his latest treatise, titled On the Relative Morality of Fruit. You pretend to read it. You leave at sunset. The sundial casts a clean shadow, and Dorian waves from his rooftop like a philosopher king on a garden shed. Your next stop takes you down winding goat paths, past fig trees heavy with fruit, and into a lazy little town curled beside a river. It's so peaceful it practically purrs, until you meet the beekeeper. Her name is Melita, and she's standing beside a row of hives, fuming. They've unionized, she says. You blink. The bees. No, the smoke pots. She gestures at a pile of clay jars used to calm the hives. Won't stay lit. Won't smoke. Refuse to cooperate. Maybe they're just wet? Hercules offers. I dried them for days. Still nothing. And now the bees are annoyed. Look. You look. One bee hovers near your ear, glaring. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek beekeepers used terracotta hives and pine smoke to calm bees. Honey was sacred, used in offerings, medicine, and even mummification rites. Apiculture was so respected that tombs sometimes included carvings of beekeepers alongside priests and soldiers. You examine the smoke pots. Most are cracked. Some are packed too tightly. One is being used as a squirrel nest. You clean them out, rebuild the airflow chambers, and scrape fresh pine resin from a nearby tree for kindling. When you relight the first pot, a fragrant smoke curls skyward. The bees relax instantly. One even lands on your sleeve, then buzzes away peacefully, probably to file a report. Melita beams. I'll name a queen after you, she says. Hercules puffs a smoke pot and mutters, I better not get stung. You won't, Melita says, unless you panic. Bees hate panic. He panics. He gets stung. You get honey cakes. All is well. The path continues downstream, where children splash in shallow eddies and olive trees lean toward the water like sleepy gossipers. Eventually, you reach a modest workshop near a collapsed bridge. A man covered in chalk thus greets you with both hope and frustration. I am Demophon Bridgemaker, or rather, bridge repairer, or perhaps bridge regretter. He gestures at the wreckage. Storm washed out the center. Again, my arch is too ambitious, too poetic. It needs realism. Hercules cracks his knuckles. You want me to lift a river? No, Demophon says. I want you to brace the keystone. Mainstream historical fact. Greek bridges used stone arches, carefully balanced with a central keystone to distribute pressure. It was a delicate art. Some bridges lasted centuries. Others, well, didn't. You study the wreck. The stones are sound, but the arch is skewed, with ropes, levers, and an improvised pulley system. You donate your belt. You help realign the base while Hercules resets the center with a thud so satisfying it echoes up the canyon. Demophon cheers. You've saved my poetry. He gives you a small, smooth stone etched with a laurel leaf. For balance, he says, by now, the sun is high again. Your sandals are dusty. Hercules has sweat marks shaped like amphory. You stop at a roadside spring to cool off and refill water skins. That's when you hear it. Drums, not war drums, festival drums. You follow the sound and arrive at a village square dressed in garlands and ribbons. People are dancing. Musicians play lyres and flutes. And in the middle stands a painted stage with a sign that reads, "Dramatic competition, all welcome." A smiling woman in theatrical robes grabs your arm. You have a face that says narrator. Come, we need one more for the tragedy. You glance at Hercules. He shakes his head. No way. Cut to Hercules in a cardboard helmet, dramatically holding a plastic sword, while villagers chant, "Oh, fate. Oh, figs." You narrate. Poorly. Everyone loves it. Mainstream historical fact. Theatrical competitions were central to Greek civic life. Citizens wrote, directed, and acted in plays, often satirical or tragic. Audience participation was common, and many playwrights were celebrated as much as generals. After the curtain call, a sheep bleats. You're given a wreath of paper leaves and a meat pie the size of your head. Hercules refuses to talk about the experience. "That was my 10th labor," he mutters. You walk out of town to the sound of tambourines and laughter. The last note on your scroll reads, "Tomb Guardian, final errand." Then rest. You glance at each other. "One last stop," you say. "Let's hope it doesn't involve bees," he replies. The tomb lies where the land gives up and the sea begins, on a wind-swept cliff overlooking the Aegean, where gulls circle lazily and the waves perform their eternal ballet. A line of ancient cypress trees leads you to it, bent like old men in thought. The tomb is not grand. It is not gilded, guarded by sphinxes, or whispered about by oracles. It is small, square, and very old, with a lintel stone bearing an inscription so worn that only the sea air seems to remember its meaning. You read what little remains. "Here lies the Los who kept the door." That's it. Hercules asks, squinting. No date? No epics? No curse. You knock politely on the stone. Nothing happens. Then a voice, thin and dry as parchment. "You're late." A figure emerges from the shadows. He is stooped, wrapped in a shawl that may once have been ceremonial, now patched in places with fishing net. His beard is long enough to have its own opinions. He carries a crooked staff and squints at you like your overdue library books. "I'm the Guardian," he says. "You must be the replacements." Mainstream historical fact. Some ancient Greek tombs, especially for certain civic or religious roles, had symbolic guardians who maintained rituals, tended offerings, and sometimes lived adjacent to the grave for years. These guardians were often seen as liminal figures, neither fully alive nor dead to the community. "We're just running errands." You explain. "Exactly," he says. "That's all death is, finishing errands. Now come." He leads you inside. The tomb smells of old earth and time. It's humble. Just a stone bed, a worn oil lamp, and a single bronze mask mounted on the far wall. The mask is peaceful, serene, a face at rest after a long shift. He was the doorkeeper, the Guardian explains, for 47 years. Kept time, kept watch, kept silence. "And now?" you ask. "Now," he says, "he's due a final rite. I'm too old. My knees hurt." You light the last lamp. He hands you a small vessel of olive oil. You pour it into the old lamp's bowl, trim the wick, and strike a flint. A steady flame takes hold. The tomb brightens, just enough to see the corners of the room smile. A wind sighs through the stones. "That's it," the Guardian says. He's off duty. Mainstream historical fact. Funerary lamps were often left burning for days, symbolizing safe passage to the afterlife. In some places, they were relit on anniversaries as a way to renew memory and community ties with the deceased. You step out into the golden evening. The sun is folding itself into the sea, and the first stars peek out like sleepy children at a window. The Guardian stretches his back with an audible pop. "Good," he says. "Now I can go fishing." "Wait," you ask. "You're leaving?" He nods. "Time to live my second life. Maybe take up baking." He walks away without looking back. You and Hercules stand in silence, watching the sky go purple. Well, Hercules says we did it. We did. There is nothing more on the scroll, just a single dot, a period, an ending. You sit down in the grass, shoes off, backs against a cypress tree. The breeze tastes like salt and rosemary. You watch the stars appear, one by one, like memories. Quirky final fact. In ancient Greece, constellations weren't just mythic creatures. They were stories of everyday people elevated by memory. A loyal guard, a sleepy philosopher, a beekeeper, a poet with bridge problems. All of them might have earned a place among the stars if someone remembered to tell their stories. And you did. You sigh. Hercules snores. Somewhere a lyre plays itself. Sleep comes gently, like a well-told tale. You wake up to the sound of gulls arguing over breakfast scraps and the creak of a fisherman's cart nearby. The sky is washed in soft dawn colors, pale pinks and warm golds, like someone spilled diluted nectar across the clouds. Hercules is already up, of course. He's never been a sleep-in kind of guy. He's tying up his lion pelt like an apron and adjusting a fish scale stain cap that you're pretty sure he didn't have yesterday. Today, he says with suspicious enthusiasm, we're fishmongers. That's right. The next odd job? Working a seafood stall at the Aegean market. Smelly, chaotic, and more math than you were promised. But hey, honest work is honest work. You trail him through the sleepy village, where salt clings to every stone and the early sun glints off fish scales like silver coins. The market is already waking up. Stalls unfolding like tired flowers, vendors barking out half-formed greetings, an entire air humming with the potent aroma of brine seaweed, and someone grilling squid way too early. Name's Peribia, says a stall owner, a woman with arms like marble columns and a smile sharp enough to fillet mackerel. You sort, you weigh, you haggle. No freebies, even if they look heroic. She eyeballs Hercules. He salutes her with a sardine. Your tasks are simple in theory. You sort anchovies from sardines harder than it sounds when they're flopping, arrange sea bass by girth, and haggle with irritable poets who insist on getting the fish that looks most melancholy. Mainstream historical fact. In classical Athens, fish markets were central social hubs, not just for food but for gossip, politics, and matchmaking. Prices fluctuated based on freshness, catch size, and how cleverly you could argue. Hercules is surprisingly good at haggling. He throws in dramatic flourishes, like flexing before quoting a price or dramatically sniffing a trout and declaring it not heroic enough. You're in charge of tallying coins. The ancient drachma system is confusing. One old man pays with what appears to be a seashell and a promise. You give him a squid just for creativity. Historians still argue whether squid was considered luxury fare. You muse, weighing a particularly plump specimen, or just very chewy art. By midday, the stall is buzzing. Hercules has become a minor celebrity among the fish-buying elite. A group of elderly women request he autograph their octopus. He obliges, using squid ink and a spare fig leaf. And then she arrives, clad in royal blue robes, with hair coiled like a nautilus shell. She glides toward the stall, like a queen inspecting the troops. This is Lady Andres, the city's seafood critic. Her column in the Athens Weekly Oracle can make or break a fisherman's year. She examines everything, smells, pokes, prods, says nothing. Then finally, she points. That one. Hercules fumbles the net. You hand her the fish with trembling reverence. She pays an exact coin, offers a regal nod, and vanishes. Peribia exhales. You just earned us a good month. You and Hercules sit back on overturned baskets, drenched in seawater and pride. Quirky fact. Ancient Greek fishmongers often sang to attract customers, sometimes composing spontaneous seafood-themed poems. One popular verse began, "O mullet of morning, your eyes see truth." Inspired, Hercules begins a ballad to a sea bream. A passing child tips him with a fig. That night, the market closes with the smell of roasted garlic and the sound of waves lapping against stone docks. You lie on a stack of nets under the stars, watching a crab steal someone's sandal. "Odd job," you whisper. "Oddly perfect," Hercules replies, mouthful of grilled eel. You fall asleep to the gentle creak of boats and the soft purr of distant lyres. The stars are barely blinking out when you and Hercules find yourselves knee-deep in lilies and chaos. Today's job? Wedding planners. For Nymphs, you're barely awake, and already someone's crying over lavender placements. It began with a scroll delivered by a swan wearing a wreath, very bridal. The scroll itself was gold-edged, perfumed with honeysuckle, and written in the sort of loopy cursive that clearly hadn't seen a vowel in centuries. The bride, Calyanira, a naiad, wanted a tastefully divine yet dew-kiss ceremony, and she'd heard Hercules was strong with logistics. You were included by default. So now, welcome to event planning, Ancient Greece edition. The venue is a moss-draped glade on the edge of Arcadia, with a waterfall chorus and natural fairy-light ambience courtesy of fireflies on retainer. The guests? Dryads, naiads, oreads, and a few very reluctant satyrs in tunics that clearly weren't their idea. You glance down the list. You've got 7 fountains to fill, 12 garlands to untangle, a seating chart that includes a minor wind god and 2 scorned exes, and 1 cyclops who RSVP'd maybe. Hercules is already hauling tree stumps into semicircular guest arrangements, muttering, "Symmetry is sacred." Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greece, weddings often lasted 3 days and included sacrifices, song, feast, and a ceremonial bath. Water spirits were deeply connected to nuptials, symbolizing purity, fertility, and clean feet. You are in charge of the guest welcome table, which mostly means explaining to woodland creatures why there are no gluten-free ambrosia options. A dryad brings you a cake made of pine needles. "It's earthy," she insists. You gently reassign it to the altar decor. Behind you, Hercules is getting fitted for a laurel sash by the bride's mother, who is definitely flirting. "Is that a bearskin? You must exfoliate well," she purrs. Quirky tidbit. In some myths, nymphs were known to elope with mortals, especially if they were charming or smelled like roasted barley. Hence, the custom of hiding bachelors during large gatherings involving with nymphs. Suddenly, a shriek. One of the flower satchels, meant for ceremonial scattering, has been stolen by a hedgehog. You and Hercules give chase through the underbrush, armed with honeyed apricots in a firm tone. The ceremony begins just as the sun dips to kiss the horizon. Calyanira floats in on a lillipad, literal flotation. Her veil is made of spider silk and mist. Her groom, a river spirit named Aegean, wears a tunic woven from cattails and smugness. As Hercules holds the ceremonial arch steady with one hand and waves off mosquitoes with the other, you cue the lyres. Historians still argue whether wedding lyres were tuned in minor keys to keep jealous gods away. You murmur to yourself, noting the sharpness of a few notes. And then, commotion at the edge of the glade. The Cyclops has arrived, and he's brought a goat. "For luck," he grunts, plopping the goat into the buffet line. You intercept just in time, redirecting the creature toward a more appropriate area. The mythical petting zoo, the fawns whipped up last minute. After vows are exchanged in song and fog. The reception erupts into dancing. Nymphs swirl like dandelions, satyrs play panpipes with reckless abandon, and Hercules is dragged into a circle dance where he absolutely, positively should not be that flexible. You nibble a honey cake and watch as the sky darkens and the stars return. Not bad for a day's work. Hercules says, hair full of ivy, feet full of blisters. The newlyweds apart on a swan-shaped canoe. The guests light lanterns that float gently upward, glowing orbs dotting the black velvet sky. You and Hercules are the last to leave, packing leftover petals and try to ignore the increasingly loud snoring of the Cyclops, who has fallen asleep in the punch bowl. You sigh. Tomorrow, something normal? Hercules grins. Define normal. You don't answer. But as you fall asleep under a canopy of willow branches, the nymphs' laughter drifting like firefly trails, you think, maybe this was the most normal Hercules job yet. The next scroll arrives not with a thunderclap or a disgruntled bird, but quietly, wedged under a smooth stone beside a fig tree. It smells faintly of crushed minerals and wet paint. You pick it up, blinking at the odd inscription. Seasonal work. Temple muralist. Urgently needed. Must have strong arms and modest ego. You turn to Hercules. He's currently trying to extract a pebble from his sandal with a piece of olive wood and humming off key. Well, you say, time to get artistic. The Temple of Clio sits nestled against a hillside in a sleepy coastal town where the goats outnumber the poets, and even the cicadas yawn. It's the off-season, no festivals, no sacrifices, no tour groups from Athens asking if the olive oil is artisanal. The priest greets you with tired eyes and an apologetic shrug. The old muralist ran off with a harpist. Deadline's tomorrow. The Archon's wife wants mythological realism with emotional nuance. And hydrangeas. You and Hercules exchange a look that says, this is going to be something. Mainstream historical fact. Temples in ancient Greece were often decorated with murals depicting heroic deeds, mythic battles, and scenes from daily life, intended to educate and inspire worshippers. Paints were made from crushed minerals like ochre, azurite, and malachite. Quirky tidbit. Some murals were updated seasonally or painted over entirely to reflect new political alliances, recent heroic deeds, or simply because the patron's favorite god had changed that month. You're ushered into the main chamber, a domed room with columns like silent giants and walls scraped raw from previous attempts at creative expression. Hercules surveys the blank space. So, fresco or slapdash? He means, do we plan this or do we Hercules this? You squint at the layout. The top tier is reserved for celestial figures. The middle for mortal deeds. The bottom, village life and animals. And yes, hydrangeas. Start at the top. You sigh. He climbs the scaffold in 3 strides and begins sketching a giant Zeus with suspiciously familiar biceps. You clear your throat. Maybe tone down to you suggest. Hercules smirks. Can't help it if the gods look good. You begin mixing pigments. The air fills with the scent of chalk dust, crushed seashell, and ancient lime plaster. As your brush hits the wall, something happens. Time stretches. The silence deepens. Even the light seems to soften around you. You lose hours in quiet rhythm. Swish, dab, lift. Swish, dab, lift. A peacock feathers out across the eastern wall, its tail a constellation of lapis and crushed pearl. Next to it, Hercules paints a lion mid-roar, but somehow smiling. Historians still argue whether lion expressions in Greek art were symbolic of divine approval or just bad perspective. You mumble, adjusting the lion's eyebrow. You paint mortals baking bread, building ships, wrestling pigs. Hercules fills in his labors, yes, the official ones, but also, somehow, the babysitting, the goat chase, even the nymph wedding. He adds little Easter eggs, a hedgehog in the background, a snake wearing a laurel crown, a fish counting scrolls. It's subtle, it's absurd, it's perfect. At one point, a goat walks into the temple, stares at your mural of a goat, bleats approvingly, and walks out. You take that as a win. By nightfall, your hands are stained red and gold. Hercules is whistling a tune that might be a lullaby or might be a battle chant slowed down. You can't tell anymore. The final touch, the hydrangeas. They cascade down the columns, more dream than flower, soft periwinkle, wisps of lavender, a blue so gentle it barely registers on the wall. You both stand back. It is beautiful, not perfect, but honest, not divine, but alive, and most of all, strangely calming. The priest enters, clutching a fig tart. He looks up, mouth slowly falling open. Well, he says after a long moment, this will do. He places a tart on the altar as an offering to Clio, muse of history, and whispers, may she be amused. You and Hercules collapse outside under a fig tree, backs against a warm stone, stars just beginning to blink into place. Hercules sighs. That's the last job for a while. You nod, and now the wind down begins. The hill is quiet now. The brushes have been rinsed. The paint pot's closed. The goat is snoring softly in the vestibule, dreaming of murals. The stars above you blink slowly, as if half asleep themselves, keeping time with your breath. The breeze carries the faintest scent of pigment and fig leaves. You feel the weight of your limbs. You feel the stillness settle over the temple, over the town, over your own bones. You remember the dance of light on painted stone. You remember the laughter of dryads, the hum of the market, the soft shuffle of sandals on marble. All of it, fading now, like a story whispered into twilight. You let it go. You let it drift. The myths, the madness, the murals. You did it. You wanted the odd jobs of Hercules, and lived to nap about it. And now it's time. Let your eyes soften. Let the silence fold around you like warm linen. There's nothing left to lift, paint, plan, or chase. Not even a cyclops with a goat. Just this moment. Just your breath. Just sleep.